Brian Fields stated, smugly reclining back in his chair, "Jennifer, your financial strategy is outdated after 14 years. We need you gone by tomorrow." My hands were folded neatly on the polished mahogany table as I sat across from him in the boardroom of Velthorn Global headquarters. Beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the glittering Houston skyline, which I had loved seeing during my many meetings as senior financial controller. "I understand," I said calmly, looking him in the eye. "Thank you for the opportunity." He was obviously perplexed by my cool answer. His brows knitted slightly, as though he had anticipated complaints or tears. Rather, I collected my notes, ironed my blazer, and left with a proud stance. Jennifer Mallister is my name. At Velthorn Global, a global logistics firm with operations in 37 countries, I have spent 14 years handling the financial controls. I am 52 years old. I've made it through 2 recessions, 3 CEOs, and innumerable reorganizations. I've created processes that have shielded the business from financial irregularities and saved millions of dollars. And now, a man who had only worked for our firm for 3 months had abruptly sacked me. With an Ivy League degree, expertise at a prominent consulting firm, and promises of innovative financial management, Brian Fields made a big splash when he joined Velthorn. His flamboyant presentations and contemporary style pleased the board. They overlooked what I saw right away. He made contradictory statements, made nebulous allusions to prior achievements, and showed a concerning readiness to circumvent accounting procedures. I reflected about my meeting with Elaine Woodward, the chair of the audit committee, 2 weeks prior as I cleared my desk and packed stuff into cardboard boxes. After hours, she had summoned me to her office, shut the door, and talked softly. She handed a document across her desk and said, "Jennifer, we've noticed some unusual patterns in expense reports and contract approvals coming from the new CFO's office. There is enough to cause anxiety, but nothing specific as of yet. We want you to investigate it in private." I had previously observed the disparities myself: high consulting fees to unidentified businesses, travel costs that didn't correspond with confirmed work visits, and contract conditions that were changed after approval. As was in my habit, I had started to methodically organize the evidence and document everything. When Brian dismissed me, he failed to recognize that I was more than simply an antiquated financial controller. Velthorn's financial control systems were created by myself. I was familiar with every audit trail, approval process, and digital passing. More significantly, I understood precisely what I had to look for in order to reveal whatever he was concealing. I wasn't upset as I took my stuff to my car. I was adamant. Brian Fields had just committed his greatest career error. I've never been one for grand displays of emotion. My father, a mathematics professor, had taught me that logic and evidence always triumph over drama and outbursts. This philosophy had served me well throughout my life, particularly in my finance career, where precision and facts were currency. My modest 2-bedroom condo welcomed me as I arrived home earlier than usual. 14 years at Velthorn had allowed me to create a comfortable life, if not extravagant. My retirement fund was solid, my mortgage nearly paid off. I could have simply walked away, found another position, and left Brian Fields to whatever schemes he was orchestrating. But that wasn't who I was. I poured myself a glass of Cabernet and settled at my dining table, spreading out the documents I'd been quietly collecting over the past few weeks. Before I'd left the office, I had emailed myself key reports that I knew would be relevant. Nothing confidential. I was too ethical for that, just the publicly available information that, when placed in the right context, told a damning story. My phone buzzed with a text from Elaine. "Heard the news. Call me." I dialed her immediately. "Jennifer, I'm shocked," she said when she picked up. "This came out of nowhere." "Not entirely," I replied. "Brian's been pushing me out since he arrived. I just didn't expect it to happen quite so abruptly." "The timing is suspicious, considering what we discussed," Elaine said carefully. "Have you found anything concrete?" "Not yet, but I'm close." I've identified patterns in the consulting contracts with Meridian Bay Holdings. The company exists on paper, but I can't find any evidence of actual services provided. That's concerning, but not enough for the board to act on, Elaine sighed. Give me 2 weeks, I said. I may no longer have direct access to the systems, but I've built relationships with people who do, and I know exactly what to look for. After we hung up, I spent the evening organizing my approach. I created a detailed timeline of Brian's actions since his arrival, noting coinciding financial activities. I listed key staff members who might provide insights without compromising their positions. I identified external sources that could verify my suspicions. The next morning, instead of heading to the office, as I had for 14 years, I set up shop at my dining table, my laptop, notepads, and financial documents spread across the surface. I had contacts throughout the financial industry in Houston, people who respected me and my work. It was time to call in some favors. By noon, I'd spoken with 3 former colleagues who now worked at banks that handled Velhorn's accounts. They couldn't share specifics, but their careful hints confirmed my suspicions. Something wasn't right with the new financial arrangements. A week into my investigation, I received an unexpected visitor. Thomas Wright, Velhorn's IT director, rang my doorbell at 8 p.m. Unannounced, he said nervously, adjusting his glasses. But I couldn't risk communicating through company channels. I invited him in, offering coffee, which he gratefully accepted. Things have been strange since you left, Thomas confided, his voice low despite us being alone in my condo. Brian's brought in a new IT security team. They've modified access protocols to the financial systems. Even I don't have full visibility anymore. That's unusual, I said, keeping my tone neutral, even as alarm bells rang in my mind. There's more, Thomas continued. Yesterday, I was asked to retrieve all emails between you and the audit committee dating back 6 months. I had to comply officially, but he reached into his messenger bag and handed me a flash drive. I wanted you to know this was the setback I'd been anticipating. Brian was covering his tracks, likely having realized the audit committee had concerns. His firing me suddenly made perfect sense. He discovered I was looking into his activities. Thank you for taking this risk, I told Thomas sincerely. After he left, I plugged in the drive and reviewed its contents. Thomas had included not just the emails Brian was searching for, but also internal system logs showing unusual access patterns. Large financial data transfers were occurring during odd hours, with approval shortcuts I'd never authorized when designing the system. The next morning, I received another blow. My longtime assistant, Vanessa, called in tears. Jennifer, they're saying terrible things about you, she sobbed. Brian told the department you were under investigation for financial improprieties before you left. That you were fired for cause. I felt the first genuine anger since my dismissal. Attacking my reputation crossed a line. What exactly did he say, Vanessa? I asked. That you'd been manipulating vendor contracts for years. That you'd created a system with backdoors only you understood. That the company might have to restate earnings because of your methods. It was a clever move on Brian's part, discredit me before I could expose him. But he'd made a critical error by attacking me publicly. He'd given me justification to defend myself publicly. Vanessa, I need you to do something for me, I said. I need the current version of the Henderson contract, the one Brian renegotiated last month. That's above my clearance now, she whispered. Check the archive system, I suggested. The original should have been logged before changes were made. That afternoon, Vanessa sent me what I needed, evidence that contract terms had been substantially altered after board approval, shifting millions in fees to consulting entities with vague deliverables. Entities I now strongly suspected were connected to Brian himself. I immediately forwarded the evidence to Elaine. Her response was swift. Come to my home office tonight. Bring everything you have. Elaine's Tudor-style home sat in one of Houston's older, established neighborhoods. Her home office reflected her personality, meticulous, traditional, yet thoroughly modern where it mattered. Multiple monitors displayed financial data while antique bookshelves lined the walls. "The board is splitting on this issue," she explained as we reviewed my evidence. "Half see Brian as the innovative force Valorn needs in changing market conditions. The other half has concerns, but wants concrete proof before acting against the CEO's hand-picked CFO. This isn't just about innovative versus traditional approaches," I argued, pointing to the contract discrepancies. These changes weren't approved by the board, but resulted in an additional $2.7 million in consulting. The beneficiary companies, Meridian Bay Holdings and Falcrest Advisors, have virtually no online presence or verifiable business activities. Elaine nodded slowly. "It's suspicious, but we need to establish a direct connection to Brian." "I think I know how," I replied, pulling up the corporate registration documents I'd obtained through my industry contacts. Both companies were registered 6 months ago by the same law firm, a firm that also represents Axington Partners, Brian's former employer. Elaine noted, her eyes narrowing. "Exactly. And if we look at the authorized signatories." I pulled up another document highlighting a name, Patricia Fields. "Any relation?" "His wife." I confirmed she uses her maiden name professionally, but I found their marriage announcement from 8 years ago. Elaine leaned back in her chair, absorbing the implications. "This is getting serious, Jennifer. We're talking about potential fraud, conflicts of interest, misappropriation of funds." "Which is why he needed me gone," I explained. "As financial controller, I would eventually question these transactions during routine audits." "He knew that." But he didn't anticipate that we'd already asked you to look into his activities," Elaine said, with the first smile I'd seen from her in weeks. We spent the next 3 hours building a comprehensive case. The pattern was clear. Brian had been systematically directing Velthorn funds to companies connected to himself, disguised as legitimate consulting services. Conservative estimates put the total at nearly $4.5 million in just 3 months. As I drove home that night, I felt cautiously optimistic. The evidence was compelling, but corporate politics were complex. Brian had allies on the board, particularly those who had advocated for his hiring. They wouldn't abandon him easily. My phone rang at 6 a.m. the next morning. It was Vanessa again, speaking in a hushed, urgent tone. "Jennifer, something strange is happening. A team from an outside accounting firm arrived this morning. They're reviewing all financial records from the past 5 years, your entire tenure as controller." My stomach tightened. Brian was escalating his defense by going on the offensive, attempting to find or fabricate evidence of irregularities during my leadership. "Did they say who authorized the audit?" I asked. "Brian said it was the board's directive." She hesitated. "But what, Vanessa?" "I overheard him on the phone earlier. He said they're not finding anything useful yet, but keep digging. We need something concrete before the emergency board meeting." The emergency board meeting could only mean one thing. Elaine had brought our evidence to key board members, and they were taking it seriously. Brian was scrambling to divert attention and discredit me before he lost control of the narrative. "Thank you, Vanessa. Be careful, and don't get caught helping me." "I won't," she whispered. "Most of us know who the real professional is here." The next 48 hours unfolded like a high-stakes chess match. Brian made his move by calling an impromptu press conference, announcing a modernization of Velthorn's outdated financial systems and hinting at concerning discoveries about previous practices. Though he never mentioned me by name, the implication was clear to anyone familiar with the company. I watched the live stream from my dining room table, noting how his confidence seemed forced, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. He was scared. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from former colleagues and industry contacts, many expressing outrage at the thinly veiled accusations. I responded graciously but said little. This wasn't the time for a public battle. Instead, I focused on strengthening our case. A former classmate who now worked at the Securities and Exchange Commission provided insights without violating any protocols about what would constitute definitive evidence of financial misconduct. Armed with this knowledge, I refined my approach, focusing on documenting the money flow from Velhorn to the shell companies and ultimately to Brian. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. While reviewing Brian's travel expenses, I noticed a pattern of weekend trips to Austin. The company had paid for luxury hotel stays, claiming they were for potential investor meetings. But cross-referencing with Velthorn's investor relations calendar showed no such meetings scheduled. A social media search revealed the missing piece. Patricia Fields had opened an art gallery in Austin 3 months ago. The grand opening photos showed Brian proudly standing beside his wife on the same weekend he claimed to be meeting investors at Velhorn's expense. More damning was what I discovered when I dug deeper. The gallery's business filing listed its primary financial backer as Meridian Bay Holdings, the same shell company receiving consulting fees from Velhorn. I immediately sent the evidence to Elaine, who responded with a single line: "Emergency board meeting moved up to tomorrow, 9 a.m. That evening, I received another unexpected visitor. Gregory Patel, Velhorn's general counsel, stood at my door, looking uncomfortable. "May I come in, Jennifer?" he asked formally. I hesitated. Gregory reported directly to the CEO and had always been politically savvy. His loyalties were unclear. "I understand your concern," he said, noticing my hesitation. "But I'm here on official business. The board has requested your presence at tomorrow's meeting." "Why would the board want me there?" I asked, still not inviting him in. "The audit committee has presented serious allegations. The board wants to hear directly from all parties involved." He handed me an official letter. "This is a formal invitation, not a subpoena. But I strongly advise you to attend." After he left, I called Elaine, who confirmed the invitation was legitimate. "It wasn't my idea," she admitted. "Several board members insisted on hearing your perspective directly. Brian will be there too." "He'll come prepared to discredit me," I said. "Then you'd better be more prepared," she replied simply. I spent the night organizing my evidence into a clear, compelling presentation. I focused on facts, avoiding accusations or emotional appeals. The numbers told the story better than any rhetoric could. As dawn broke, I prepared myself mentally for the confrontation to come. I selected my most professional outfit, a charcoal suit that projected authority without flashiness. I reviewed my notes one final time. When I arrived at Velhorn headquarters, security escorted me up to the executive floor, where I'd spent countless hours over 14 years. The familiar faces I passed regarded me with mixtures of sympathy, curiosity, and, in some cases, hope. Standing outside the boardroom doors, I took a deep breath. In a few minutes, I would face the man who had tried to destroy my reputation and career. But unlike Brian Fields, I had truth on my side. The boardroom fell silent as I entered. 14 pairs of eyes turned toward me, the 12 board members, Elaine at the head of the table, and Brian, who looked as though he'd aged years in the week since he'd fired me. "Thank you for joining us, Ms. Mallister," said Harold Thompson, the board chairman. "We find ourselves in an unusual situation that requires clarity." I nodded professionally, taking the empty seat directly across from Brian. His attempt at a confident smile faltered as our eyes met. "For those who haven't been briefed fully," Harold continued, "serious allegations have been raised concerning financial irregularities under Mr. Fields' leadership. Countering allegations have been made suggesting these claims are retaliatory on Ms. Mallister's part." Following her dismissal, Brian leaned forward with respect. "Chairman, Ms. Mallister's presence here is inappropriate. She's no longer an employee and has shown clear animosity." "Ms. Mallister is here at my request," Elaine interrupted firmly. "As head of the audit committee, I commissioned her investigation before her dismissal, not after." I saw several board members exchange surprised glances. Clearly, Brian had been controlling the narrative. "I believe it would be helpful for Ms. Mallister to present her findings directly," Elaine suggested. Harold nodded. "Proceed, Ms. Mallister." I connected my laptop to the presentation system and began methodically laying out the evidence. I showed the contract discrepancies, the shell companies, the money trail to the art gallery, the fraudulent travel expenses. I presented email trails, system logs, and financial transfers. Each slide built upon the previous one, constructing an irrefutable case. In summary, I concluded 30 minutes later, approximately $4.8 million has been diverted from Velthorn Global to entities connected directly to Mr. Fields or his family members, disguised as legitimate business expenses. The room remained silent for several moments after I finished. Brian's face had drained of color. "These are outrageous accusations," he finally sputtered. "This is clearly a vindictive attempt to—" "Are you denying that Patricia Fields is your wife?" asked one board member. "Or that Meridian Bay Holdings funded her gallery?" asked another. "Or that you charged Belair for investor meetings that never occurred?" added a third. Brian's eyes darted around the room, seeking allies and finding none. These connections are being presented without context. There are legitimate business reasons for— "I've seen enough," Harold interrupted. "Mr. Fields, please wait outside while the board deliberates." "You can't possibly be taking her word over mine," Brian protested. "She's clearly biased." "Outside, Mr. Fields," Harold repeated firmly. "You'll have an opportunity to respond formally through your counsel after." After Brian left, Harold turned to me. "Miss Mallister, thank you for your thorough presentation. The board would also like you to step out while we discuss next steps." I gathered my materials and walked toward the door. As I reached for the handle, Harold spoke again. "One more thing, Miss Mallister. The methods you used to gather this evidence, would you characterize them as outdated?" A small smile crossed my face. "I prefer the term thorough," I said. Chairman Thompson and several board members chuckled, breaking the tension in the room. In the hallway, I saw Brian speaking urgently with Gregory Patel. When he noticed me, he broke off mid-sentence, his face contorting with anger. "You think you've won?" he hissed. "But this isn't over. I have connections you can't imagine." I replied calmly, "Unfortunately for you, Mr. Fields, I don't rely on imagination. I rely on evidence." The board's deliberation lasted nearly 2 hours. I waited patiently in a small conference room, reviewing emails on my phone. Brian paced the hallway outside, periodically making heated phone calls. Finally, Gregory Patel appeared. "The board would like to see both of you." We returned to the boardroom where Harold's expression revealed nothing about their decision. After careful consideration of the evidence, he began, "The board has reached several conclusions. First, there is sufficient cause to terminate Mr. Fields' employment with Veleo Global, effective immediately." Brian started to protest, but Harold held up his hand. "Second, we have notified appropriate authorities regarding the financial irregularities uncovered. Mr. Fields, I suggest you retain legal counsel promptly." Brian's face flushed deep red. "This is a mistake. You'll all regret it. I have explanations for everything presented today." "Save them for the investigation," Harold replied coldly. "Security will escort you to clear out your personal belongings." As Brian was led away, Harold turned to me. "Miss McAllister, the board owes you an apology. Your dismissal was clearly orchestrated to conceal financial misconduct." "Thank you, Chairman," I replied professionally. "Which brings me to our third conclusion," Harold continued. "The board would like to offer you reinstatement to your position, with a significant compensation adjustment to reflect both your loyalty and the apparent increased scope of your responsibilities." I hadn't expected this turn of events. I'd been focused on exposing Brian, not on returning to Belair. Additionally, Elaine added, "We'd like to create a new position, reporting directly to the Audit Committee, Chief Compliance Officer. You would have independent authority to investigate any financial concerns without interference from executives." The offer was compelling: increased authority, direct board access, and, reading between the lines, protection from any future executive who might find my methods too rigorous. "I appreciate the offer," I said carefully, I'd like some time to consider it. Harold gave a nod. Obviously, but I hope you'll agree that Vallejo needs the exact kind of financial leadership you've shown, one that is thorough, moral, and seemingly unflappable. As the recently hired Chief Compliance Officer, I returned to Vallejo Global 3 weeks later. My first assignment was to perform a thorough analysis of every financial transaction made during Brian's brief employment. Although severe, the damage was controlled. Although Brian had acted swiftly, his bigger plans had not yet been carried out. By taking legal action against his shell firms, the majority of the money that had been diverted could be recovered. As expected, the media used sensationalism to report on Brian's indictment. One headline said, "CFO's modern methods include modern crimes." Vallejo's compliance officer discovers multi-million-dollar fraud, said another. I maintained a quiet profile and prioritized bolstering the business's financial controls above media attention. My staff grew to include compliance experts and forensic accountants who were as dedicated to accuracy and openness as I was. I was informed 6 months later that Brian had agreed to a plea bargain in which he admitted to embezzlement and wire fraud. He would surrender any assets related to the stolen money and serve 4 years in federal prison. The settlement included the seizure and liquidation of Patricia's gallery. Elaine came into my office the day the news was announced. "Do you feel vindicated?" she inquired. I honestly said I never needed vindication. All I needed was for the truth to surface. She gave a knowing smile. The board is undoubtedly happy. 2 major control flaws that would have led to issues later have already been avoided by your new compliance structure. I responded, "Just doing my job." "Your old job," she teasingly said. At last, I gave myself permission to laugh honestly. I've grown to value that title, you know. Outdated methods such as documentation, cross-verification, and truly knowing where money flows are reportedly novel ideas in certain circles. Elaine raised an imaginary glass and remarked, "Here's to being outdated." "I like classic," I smiled in response. "Like good wine and good bookkeeping." As I reflect on the experience, I see that Brian's biggest error was not focusing on me in particular or his deceptive tactics. It was ignoring the fact that honesty is always in trend in the financial industry. It was the very strategies he rejected as antiquated that ultimately led to his downfall. While creating Vallejo's new compliance department, I frequently reflected on the idea that sometimes the most effective form of retaliation isn't about getting even, but rather about demonstrating your worth.